Good afternoon, everybody. Glad you're able to make it today to explore crafting connections. You have been promised 4 ways, count them 4, to use crafts to drive deeper learning, but we're going to shift things up today just a little bit and actually provide you with 5 ways that you can accomplish that. You're probably here because you enjoy crafts, you like using kind of hands-on work with your students, but you want to figure out how to use that to dive deeper and really get them thinking as they build and they make and create. Let's do it. Let's make this school year, the school year you're preparing for right now, incredible. Make this a year full of that engineering mindset where students are diving deep into the things that they make and using that to help develop their understanding of this incredible world around us. Now, before we hit the content, a couple of FAQs. First of all, this is being recorded. It will be shared out with everybody who registered. So if you want to review any of the content at any time, you may certainly feel free to do that. Also, there is a resource hyperdoc sharing some of the ideas that we discussed today, some resources to help support that. That should be in the chat box. You can access that at any time. And also hanging out behind the scenes, ready to respond to any questions you may have, especially if you run into any tech difficulties or anything like that, is the one and only Robin. Robin, today, would you like to say hi to everybody?
Of course. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here and happy start of school year.
See, I told you Robin was back there. She is ready to provide assistance. Now, we've got a new sponsor today. We're sponsored today by STEM Challenge Cards, a new product coming out from VAI Education. You can see that down in the bottom of the screen, vaieducation.org. These are just simple cards which are connected to some online supports which provide you with practical STEM challenges that make use of inexpensive materials, can be used by lots of teachers in lots of different contexts to do the exact kind of stuff that we are going to be talking about today. And you will see that code THANK-U that will allow you to save 20% on any of those STEM challenge cards. It's super exciting, which is why I have put exclamation mark at the end of all of those little bullet points. So after we're done today, definitely go and check those out. As we get rolling, I'm curious to discover who is here. So Robin has opened up that poll. If you could go ahead and indicate which grade level of students you primarily work with, just to give me a feel for what our audience looks like today. So Robin, how are our responses coming in so far?
Good. Let me just give it 5 more seconds.
You only have 5 seconds to lock in your final answer.
All right. Looks like they are
What do we
slowing up.
see?
All right. Looks like we have representation from all levels, but 44% of upper elementary, so 3-5. And then middle school and high school are both at 31%, followed by K2 at 19%. And then we have 6% admin or other.
Wonderful. Well, no matter who you work with, there should be something here for you today. This kind of thing, taking this hands-on work and diving deep, thinking about it like an engineer and a scientist, it's relevant for anybody at any time. Of course, you are educators. You know that our job is not so simple as Willy Wonka's thinking over there. It's not just about playing and building crafts, but we are actually hoping to help students get some real understanding of the world around them through these experiences. And that is what we're going to discuss today. So I promised 5 different strategies. I've condensed those down into single words, each of which will unpack a little bit more. We're thinking about optimizing as we build these challenges, trying to get students to do something within some criteria, or to achieve some criteria, operating within some constraints. We're going to iterate by giving them opportunities to gather data about how things went and make improvements as they go. Really powerful way for students to think about our world, and we want to integrate that into our building and making and creating. We want them to use explanation to help understand the why behind what they're doing. We want them to evaluate not just at the end, but as they go. And we want them to use these things to have some kind of an impact wherever possible, to show kids that they do have the ability to have a positive impact on their world. So let's unpack each of those one at a time. First, we're going to talk about optimizing. Again, Here we're looking at criteria and constraints. Criteria are the success metrics that we're going to use to evaluate whether or not we did real well. So here we're going to set some concrete specifications that we can use to evaluate success or unsuccess. It's not a failure yet because we have the opportunity to come back and iterate, but we want to have those metrics so that we know one way or the other whether it hit the mark or not. Of course, with any engineering challenge, we're going to operate within some constraints. So when you build these experiences for kids, these are the two most important words for you to consider: criteria and constraints. Now, what does that look like out there in the real world? If we are learning about bees and pollinators, we might have kids do a craft in which they make something adorable, which shows bees pollinating flowers. That is great. It can help kids remember that it is bees who do that pollination. At least they're one of the species that does that. And it's important for us to have things to send home that look cute, that go on refrigerators. Those refrigerators aren't going to decorate themselves. That's a great experience for kids. But if we really want to drive a little bit deeper thinking, instead of just building something that looks like some bees, we can have students actually be the bee. These are some of our very own students doing some building here at the Van Andel Institute for Education, and their job here is to build something which transfers as much pollen as possible from one flower to another. And they're using a wide variety of different materials, really thinking critically about which of these are going to help them the best. They look at some different types and shapes of flowers to make sure that their pollinator can work in lots of different environments. And we've got this optimization component. They're trying to see how much pollen can I transfer. We can weigh that. We can provide a measurement to it. So it's got a real clear objective success metric, a real clear criterion. Here's an origami boat. Making things out of paper is wonderful practice for kids, but if we want to dive a little bit deeper, we could have them build boats and see how they race. Or on this side over here, we could see how much weight they can support before they sink. Again, here we've got some really clear criteria. How fast can it complete the course? How much weight can it support before it sinks? This is what we mean when we say optimization. And it's just at the heart of shifting from a craft where we're building something that looks cool, shifting that over to an engineering challenge where students are really exploring some scientific principles and applying those in order to achieve an objective. Another example, we could make some pinwheels. Those pinwheels look awesome. Kids can be proud of them. That is great. But if we want to dive a little bit deeper, we could have them build windmills and see which one can generate the most renewable energy. Again, I hope you can see that really clear success metric, that really clear criterion that we can use to evaluate that challenge. Having that goal gives students something to shoot for, and that makes a really powerful educational activity. So we've been toying around with this difference between objective and subjective, right? Subjective is just what we like, what looks good, right? Objective, on the other hand, is does it hit something that we can concretely measure? You can see the difference in Star Wars terms there, and sometimes things get a little bit fuzzy. Sometimes we try and put objective metrics on subjective things. I will contend that breakdancing is inherently a subjective thing. Maybe there are a lot of people who agree that this particular breakdancer didn't do an excellent job, but sometimes we run into trouble when we try and mix our objective and the subjective. And so when we think about specifying our criteria, we want to think about making it as concrete and objective as possible. That is not to say that the subjective isn't important. I hope we send that message throughout our time today. We do want kids to think about design, to think about beauty, to think about art. All of those things are important, but when we combine that with experiences which also help them to think about the world scientifically, then we get well-rounded. If we only do art or we only do science, we end up developing minds that are kind of like people who skip leg day. And we don't want that. We want well-rounded students who have both kinds of experiences. All right, let's explore a couple of pro tips here when it comes to optimization. First, we want to optimize in ways we can measure. So don't just say build a tall tower, say build a tower that is at least 2 feet tall. Or even better than that, don't put a cap on it. Think about the engineering challenges you do and see if there's a way to push it to the extreme. Build a tower that is as tall as possible. Build a boat that holds as much weight as possible. By pushing to the extreme, we ensure that students are never done, they're always improving. And that brings us to our second point, iterating. One of the things which makes engineering challenges so powerful is that they give students an opportunity to iterate, to come back and do second drafts and third drafts. This is a really powerful principle in life that we learn from our experiences and we improve as we go. And we can integrate that into our engineering challenges when we build in iteration. Now, to do that, we're not just putting something out there and saying, we've got this thing that we built, we've got this craft. Those crafts are awesome, they look really nice, they might send a wonderful message. However, we want to give our students an opportunity to go through this process of taking a problem and then planning how to solve it, building something which matches that plan, testing that out, and then refining it, going back to the drawing board, planning again based on what they've learned. As they go, it's great. It's important to have them write things down in a grade appropriate way. So here's a planning sheet that we use with some of our students who are doing this challenge where they're building the tallest tower they can, which will still stand up against our Shake Tables earthquake. So you can see they've got the opportunity to draw their design out and describe it using words. They can calculate the cost of the materials that they use. They can see how high it is and evaluate how it stands up. And then they can think about coming back and doing that a second time. And then we've got a backside where they can come back and do it a third time and a fourth time to really drive home the power of iteration in this building challenge. Now, sometimes we do this with much younger students. Here are some students who are building houses that are trying to stand up against the big bad wolf here and his terrifying hurricane as he tries to blow the house down. And here, we're just having those kids draw their design, right? And then they build it themselves. And as they make those refinements, they're discussing how things go. They're not necessarily recording any data because that's not appropriate for kids at that age for this challenge. But they can come back and draw a second design to integrate this idea of iteration. We can even iterate in things that feel like there isn't a great way to test and then improve. So we do this one challenge where students build a creature which is adapted to survive in a certain habitat where there is a certain predator. And so they build this and they talk about their adaptations. And what we've recently discovered is that it's a lot of fun and it drives home this idea of iteration to build some predators and to have those kids present it to you and then tell a little story. Once upon a time, there was the little fluffmallow creature wandering along the plains. And you can show in that story how their defenses or how their adaptations are keeping it safe. But then you can also look for ways that those defenses might not work and have the predator successfully prey upon the marshmallow creature. So using that story just to help kids think about where their design might need improvement, and then they'll get excited to go back and build more and fix it up and make it even better so that they can end up defeating that predator. So looking for opportunities to test and to encourage kids to think of this as a draft that they're making improvements on. That's the power of iteration. Again, a couple of pro tips. First of all, I am really obsessed right now with letting kids test as they're ready to test. I think this is wonderful in a classroom management sense for making sure that there's lots of kids working while some are testing, as opposed to having one like testing time where everybody has to try and squeeze into the same 3 minutes of testing. If we can avoid that bottleneck, just from a classroom management perspective, it definitely helps things flow more smoothly. Also, the idea of an MVP is a powerful one. MVP stands for minimum viable product, and it means we encourage kids to get something together that they can then get up there and test. One problem that lots of classrooms have when they get into engineering challenges like this is the challenge, the challenge illustrated by the marshmallow challenge. The famous marshmallow challenge, look it up if you've never seen it before, is this idea that people are going to take 20 sticks of spaghetti, a yard of tape, a yard of string, and a marshmallow, and build the tallest structure they can, which supports the marshmallow at the top. And this challenge has been done with lots of people, lots of times all around the world. This is an example of a successful structure built by some school children there. But what they discover is that quite often young children do better than lawyers or MBAs because they'll get something together, test it out, see how it works, and learn from their mistakes. Whereas those MBAs, they try and build this incredible structure, and at the very end, they put the marshmallow at the top and find that it tumbles to the ground. So this idea of just getting something together that you can test and learn from your experiences is a powerful idea to integrate into engineering challenges. All right, that's the first two, optimize and iterate. We also want to make sure that we incorporate explanation. We talked about the power of art, the power of that subjective to reconcile us to the world. It's an important thing that we need to integrate into our classrooms, but science can help us explain it. And they go hand in hand to give us the best experience in our time on the planet. So that kind of craft matters, where you're building something that's thinking about important subjects. But when we think about engineering, we have the opportunity also to help students think like scientists, where they're answering questions about the world, using what they know to make a prediction, which they test out, collecting observations and analyzing their data, maybe interacting with some secondary knowledge that other people have discovered about this topic before they construct their explanation and apply it to the world. That's a very similar process to what engineers go through, very closely aligned. One difference is that in science, we offer a formal explanation, whereas in engineering, we offer a solution that we provide. However, the similarities there are strong, and we can have kids answer their questions, providing a formal explanation in their engineering. I love CER's claim evidence reasonings here, where a claim answers the question. The evidence is what we actually did, and the reasoning brings in the science about it. So here's an example from the world of engineering. We just did an activity where they tried to engineer a shape to hold the most, or a structure to hold the most weight. And they could claim they discovered the triangle is the strongest shape because they tested all those shapes. And then providing some reasoning where they describe the science in an age-appropriate way. What are the big ideas here? That's where we integrate them right into the reasoning. Another example, doing this challenge where they're building that animal to survive in its habitat. The long legs and tough shell helped it survive on the planet and escape from its predators. Their evidence comes back to those tests we did with it, and then their reasoning integrates some of that vocabulary that we've been looking on, bringing in those science ideas. So having students have an opportunity to explain, to connect what they're doing to some scientific principles is a really powerful and important component of this process. If we want to use crafts and building things to drive deep learning, give them an opportunity to explain. And that can be structured in that CER format. We also want students to evaluate. We can use the criteria and constraints that we developed in that optimization section, and we can use those to build assessment questions. Maybe those are self-evaluations, maybe those are teacher evaluations, but they grow out of and are connected to the criteria and the constraints that we established. So we can put that together, share it out with our students, and let them really reflect on how things are going, and we can provide some evaluation of our own to help them to grow in the areas where they need the most growth. One thing that I think is beautiful is that with these activities, which are low floor and high ceiling, and if you're not familiar with that, that means that anybody can have some success, but there's no limit to how successful you can be. If I say build a tower out of index cards, everyone can build some sort of tower. But no matter how big your tower is, you can be challenged to make it even bigger. And what we discover there is that there's tons of self-assessment which takes place. A skateboarder is up there. There's a picture of a skateboarder for a reason. And that's because skateboarders are always self-evaluating. The process of practicing gives them an opportunity to see if I did well or not, if they fell or if they landed it. They're always self-evaluating with these kind of challenges because they're seeing where they fail and thinking about how they can work around that. So in many ways, one of the beauties of these engineering challenges is that they build in constant self-evaluation, which is a really powerful component of these experiences. So I can see there that tower. If it falls over at this point, then just like the skateboarder falling off, we can ask why. And we can make improvements to our design to see if we can improve going forward. You can see these tying together. Coming back and iterating means that there's constant evaluation. If we've got good criteria to strive after, we can use those to evaluate our success. So these 5 things really hang together and support each other. And last, but certainly not least, I want to mention that we can occasionally show kids that they have the power to impact the world outside of their classrooms by building things which have some real utility. I love Shark Tank challenges. So a lot of the time in the work we do with students, we have each group put together an idea and a prototype and a pitch that they present to an expert panel. And then we pick one that we're actually going to develop into a prototype. This is great for budgetary reasons. We can't always build a prototype of everybody's design just because that gets costly. But sometimes we can talk our school into building one of them and really showcasing how our students are creating some cool stuff that can address some real challenges in our school or in their world. You never know what kind of creativity and what kind of power exists in your classroom until you challenge them to actually put it to use. Here's a young lady from Florida who developed, as a student, a device which converts wave energy to electrical energy, the energy of the waves into electricity. Here's a student from California who used Lego Mindstorms to build a printer that quickly and easily produces Braille texts for people. Here's an 8-year-old girl from Mexico who designed and developed her own solar-powered water heater. Just all sorts of creative ideas that exist in your classroom that you can unleash when you open up that challenge to solve a real problem or a real challenge that they're interested in and that they care about. Sometimes those solutions might not change the world. Sometimes they might be a little goofy, but when you open up the possibility, you open up your students' powers of creativity. All right, in your own mind, it's great to practice remembering things. You don't have to share this with Robin. You don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but see if you can remember. What were the 5 things? How many of those 5 can you remember? I'll give you just a minute. All right, I've got all 5. I'll put the icons up there. And now we'll reveal the answer. Those are the 5 ideas that we talked about. Optimizing to make sure we've got some criteria and constraints. Iterating so they can come back and do this again and again. Explaining to connect to the science. Evaluating, hopefully as they go, and impacting the world outside of their classroom. If you do need help remembering these, I will point out that there is, if you look at just the first letters, an E, an I, an E, an I, and an O. Not in that order, but hopefully that picture comes clear. With E-I-E-I-O, we can transform things from simple crafts into engineering challenges. Robin, could you open up this last poll as you think about this, as we talked through this? Which of these jumped out to you as the thing that you really want to try to improve upon? Where do you need to improve the work that you do in your own estimation? I'll give you just a minute to go ahead and answer that question.
All right, Ben, they're still rolling in here pretty quick. So let's give it 5 more seconds and we'll shut it down.
Let's give them 6 more seconds, Robin. I just checked the clock. I think we've got time for 6.
Got it.
All right, I think those 6 seconds are up, Robin.
All right.
What are we looking at here?
All right. 50% impact, followed by 25% explain, 15% evaluate, 10% optimize, and 0% iterate.
Interesting, wonderful. You're already doing a great job of iterating and impact. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And if you do want any support with any of that, we work with schools, we work with teachers all around the country. We would love nothing more than connecting with you and your school to help walk through how we can do some of that authentic, impactful work that really makes your students' learning come alive. All right, we are going to close things out by saying if you do want any support with any of this, there are some awesome STEM challenge cards right down there in the bottom right corner. You'll see vaieducation.org. You can check those out. Again, there's physical cards you get, but also supports online. And they look something like this. So it's just a fun challenge, little description. The criteria and constraints are laid out for you. It walks through that iterative process, and quite often there's a way for you to use that to have some sort of broader impact. They're super cool, they're super simple. Definitely encourage you to check those out. All right, that brings us to a close today. There will be a survey that pops up as soon as I am done talking here. If you could fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. But I do want to finish by saying thank you. August is so exciting because as we think about this back to school season, I love thinking about all the teachers in all of the classrooms all around the world, really, who are having an impact on the lives and the learning of their students. And you are one of them. So thank you for the work and the energy that you pour into your kids on a daily basis to make the world a better place. You rock.